Molo Sanbanani, hello, how's it, and shalom. Good evening, and welcome to another episode of Liberty and Friends. My name is Sihle Ngobese, Big Daddy Liberty. Welcome to it, welcome to it. Oh, goodness me, it is a rather chilly, hey, not even chilly, it's cold. It's cold, people. It's a cold Joubert evening. So if you're watching, get that cup of coffee, get your hot chocolate going. And maybe whilst you're doing that, the rest of you can hit that like button. If you're just joining us, please hit that like button. The numbers will slowly trickle in as people come into the stream. So guys, reminder, please hit that like button and share the stream. This is Liberty and Friends, your Sunday night news wrap-up show. Hopefully this is becoming the definitive show that you watch to catch up on what you may have missed in the news week that has just gone by, or maybe something that you did see and maybe it annoyed you or made you smile or happy or you laughed at it. Whatever the case may be, on this show, we have a revolving panel of at least 4 guests who will provide analysis, opinion on the news headlines that made the week. So welcome to it, good people. Good evening. Shalom, shalom, sanbonani. Remember, please, as you enter, hit that like button. And let's get the show going. I have a very interesting panel tonight. One of my panelists, unfortunately, was unable to join us due to technical difficulties. It happens, guys. This is an online show. It happens, trust you me. So we'll miss out, unfortunately, on Unathi Kwaza, who's just having a bit of technical difficulties. Guys, I see you in the comment section. Keep coming through. And remember, as you enter, hit that like button. It really does help with the algorithm, as I always hear other YouTubers say. The algorithm, yes. But it does help with the algorithm and it gets the show out. Right, so with that being said, let me just do some last minute fiddling here. For I have, I'm hoping my sound is absolutely pashash. Let me just raise the levels there. That should be a little bit better. And with that being said, let me just bring, well, actually before that, I will disappear from screen for a moment. I just want to put my phone on Do Not Disturb. Right, with that being said, we are about to cook with grease. Let me bring my first guest on to the stream. He is an analyst, a writer, and really someone who is a firm favorite, I should call him, on the Daily Friend publication. Are you reading the Daily Friend? Hey man, make sure that it is your day-to-day source for all things news in South Africa. The Daily Friend, of course, is found at www.dailyfriend.co.za. And who am I talking about, of course, is Nicolas Lorimer. There he is on screen. Nick, with that big beard, homie, looking good. How you doing?
Yeah, no, I'm doing great, Cecil. It's good to be here.
Excellent, my brother. Good to have you on the stream. Another firm favorite and someone who I can see when I look at the numbers of his show, it's growing. And someone who is thank God, a regular here on the BDL show is Dumo, Denga, the host, of course, of the Manpatria stream. There he is on screen. Prati, what's going on, homie?
Nah, I'm good in you, man. And as always, thanks for having me.
Dog, good to have you on the stream. I know it's going to be lit anytime I have any of the fellas out in from the Manpatria outfit. Remember, Manpatria is a podcast that you can follow. I think the details of that are in the descriptor of my video as to how you spell that and how you can find it, of course, when you search for it. Last, but definitely not least, a good homie of mine. I always say this in my introduction to this fella, that he is my go-to for all things guns and guns-related self-defense and really gun rights in this country. This is someone who you definitely need to keep an eye on. And yeah, someone who I think we're going to have a lion's share of the conversation tonight with. I'm talking, of course, about Gideon, the host of not Manpatria, but rather Paratus.info. There he is. Gideon, hello.
Good evening, Sishle, Nicolas, Dumo. It's great being with you guys again, as well as with the audience. Hello to everyone in the comment section, and thank you for the invite, Sishle. It's great being here.
Brother, it is always good to have you on. Fellas, we're going to cook with grease tonight on the show, as I always say. Just a reminder to you, if you're just joining us, please, guys, hit that like button. It really does help and share the stream, whether you're watching on Twitter, YouTube, or on Facebook. Welcome to it. This is Liberty and Friends, your Sunday evening show. I'll see you guys after this very, very, very short ad break. Yeah, but yes, I did say it was very short, and that's how we do it on the VDL show. Just had to use that quick intermission to try and see if I can get my other guest on. That's not going to work. Apologies being sent from Unathi Kwaza. She's having some network issues. Okay, fellas, let's hop into it. It has been a rather eventful news week, one which I think there's so many things that have cropped up that will have such serious implications for the quality of life of South Africans who are already on the back foot as we speak. Let me begin with top of mind, and one which really let's call it annoys me, just to be polite. Gideon, I'm looking to you on this, but huge revelation, and something I think that most gun owners in the country have been kind of expecting and waiting for the penny to finally drop. Well, not the penny, so it's not a penny at all, but rather for the gauntlet to finally drop. And seemingly, the state has now come out with what it proposes will be amendments to the Firearms Control Act. Let me let you talk us through them. Why do gun owners, regardless of who they are, black, white, Indian, colored, it doesn't matter. Why should gun owners, South Africans, be worried about these amendments? What's in it?
I'm going to machine gun the issue for you, Sishle, and then maybe afterwards we can just talk about the response that's being lodged at the moment, because there's a broad campaign attacking this thing from all angles. But essentially what this amendment is it is a total attack. I'm loath to use the word total onslaught on firearm ownership rights in South Africa across the board. It removes and revokes your ability to own a firearm for self-defense in its entirety. It completely cans the collectors. You cannot become a collector and have licenses for your firearm collection anymore. Public collections are equally attacked in the sense of if there is a priceless historic firearm in a public collection, whether it's a museum or something similar, that firearm must be mangled and deactivated for it to be displayed, which would completely destroy its value. Sport shooters and hunters are now limited to even dedicated ones to such a small number of firearms that it would essentially destroy sport shooting and hunting in this country. You cannot transport a firearm if you don't have or rather, let me put it this way, you cannot transport more than 2 firearms at a time if you don't have a permit to do so, which means that if you go on a hunting trip, if you go to a 3-gun sport shooting match, you cannot actually participate because you cannot transport your guns. You're not allowed to reload. The more you read, the worse it gets. And literally everything is attacked simultaneously. They leave just enough at the end of the day that there can still be a Firearms Control Act in existence, because if they went any further, it would be tantamount to an outright complete ban in all forms. So it's an atrocity. It's an unworkable mess. And it comes in the wake of several horrible revelations. It comes in the wake of the fact that in 2018, the National Commissioner admitted to Parliament that the SAPS is overstretched and it's impossible for them to fulfill their constitutional mandate.
That's right.
It comes in the wake that we have had an increase in our homicide rate every single year since 2011. So a decade's worth of increase, not only in murder, but in other violent confrontational crimes. We are the rape capital of the world, not officially, but by inference, where there are at least 40,000 sexual or cases of sexual violence reported by victims every year. And we know it's an underreported issue, so we're looking at significantly more than that. We are the 6th most homicidal nation on earth. The police budget has been cut to the bone. The police air wing isn't flying in quite a few provinces. The VIP protection budget has been inflated. The criminal justice system, the wheels have come off because the PChem system that links forensic evidence, affecting more than 180,000 cases and 8 million pieces of evidence, hasn't been working since June last year, which means cases are being thrown out. The SAPS have failed to keep track of their own 500,000, 500,000 firearms that they own, because their firearm control system internally has been switched off because they didn't pay the service provider. God, I'm running out of scandals because there's so many.
Absolutely.
It is a complete mess. It's a complete failure of the state to uphold their end of the bargain. And now they come, you're not allowed to own guns for self-defense. You're not allowed to own guns for sport shooting.
Let's unpack this, because you've raised quite a few issues that I think deserve a little bit of attention each on their own. Yeah. There is something fundamentally evil and morally bankrupt by a politician who will sit safely ensconced behind a phalanx of bodyguards in these wonderful state homes that have armed security at the gate, actual police officers at the gate, in armored vehicles, that take them from point A to point B. That same politician then comes to us, the ordinary South African, the faith, flag, family, and freedom type South African, as I always describe us, who don't have those protections, who on an daily basis, whether you're walking at 5:30 in the morning to go to the local taxi rank, and you're weaving through shacks in order to get to that, or as was my case, you're waking up to go to the bus terminus and there's a tsotsi on the side of the corner who could pounce, looking for, in my case, my lunch. My lunches were always quite special, man. They came after my lunches. But I digress. A tsotsi who could pounce because you're an easy target for him. I, the ordinary South African, don't have the bodyguards, don't have the armored vehicle, don't have the police officers 24/7 around me. That individual is being told by politicians that no, you don't have a right to defend yourself, which is, in my view, a God-given right. And a firearm is a perfect force multiplier that allows even the most vulnerable in our society to have the ability to stand their ground against a would-be attacker, a would-be rapist, a would-be whatever, a MAGA, whatever the case may be. That citizen is now being told by the political elites, the creme de la creme of our society, that no, you don't have the right to defend yourself, and we're going to take that right away via the Firearms Control Act. Nick, I must come to you on this particular point, because I know you and I are, and Gideon, I suppose, sorry, Gideon, you're just my go-to. But I know you and I are gun nuts to an extent. Talk to me about the psyche of this. What does this do to the psyche of a South African who looks at this and goes, no. There's clearly a big chasm, between me and the political elites.
Look, I think one of the things it does is just undermine all of our institutions, because it's not even that the politicians have, alternatives, private security, bodyguards at state expense, that kind of thing. But even worse than that, they often seem to not follow the firearms rules themselves. Remember our friend Brad Julius on stage with rifles and stuff. It's very much a set of one set of rules for the political elite and another set of rules for the ordinary South Africans, and that undermines faith in institutions, because then people say, the government is completely useless. They're rubbish. We must get, we must just rely on ourselves. And I don't want to jump the gun here, because I know you intend to talk about it later. But then you can kind of get this feeling of powerlessness, especially as Gideon talked about with the state of the police, that people start turning to other ways of dealing with crime, very nasty ways, killing people, vigilantism, that kind of thing. And it's really difficult to see this as anything but a sort of totalitarian bad faith move. What is the argument here? There's very little correlation between reductions in crime and stricter gun laws, and that's not just true in South Africa. That's true basically everywhere in the world where you look. Are the advocates of gun control saying that all the criminals are getting their guns from private ownership? That's obviously not true. I mean, think of the attack on that. It was a viral video. Those two guys driving that truck recently. I don't know if you saw that. It was full of cell phones. They got shot at on the road. Those were not legal firearms that were being used to carry out that attack. There's so many illegal firearms in the country. This is just punishing law-abiding people who are willing to go through what is already quite annoying set of rules and regulations to obtain a firearm. So it's really disempowering, and there's just not a clear rationale for why anyone would do this. If we had a police force that was like efficient and super good, like the Japanese police force or something, I can see someone making a good faith argument for firearm control. But we don't have that. We have the South African Police Service, which is not a good space.
But again, by their own admission, this is not us being mean to our SAPS members, and don't get me wrong, I have a lot of SAPS members who are fans of the show, who watch the show. You guys know that I respect the sacrifice that a lot of you guys make, especially good cops, not especially, just the good cops, that they make in terms of trying to preserve law and order. That's an absolutely critical role of the state. But let's face it, guys, each South African is no more. A cop is no less than 20 minutes away from you if you're in a situation where it's life and threatening. There is no cop who's going to rock up on your door, in 30 seconds and go, "Hey, what are you doing?" Again, I'm trying to keep it light, because this is something that really, it angers me to a point where I realize where this is going. I realize that there's politics behind this, and there's also just incompetence behind this. The politics, of course, is by a group of politicians driven by ideology that seeks to disempower the individual, that seeks to disempower families in order for the state to be the sole arbiter of violence in a society, and without safeguards, without any checks, of course. So there's a political ambit to this, and Dumo, I want to come to you on this particular point, but I want to come back to my actual example on this particular issue. And guys, we'll spend some time on this, but please don't feel rushed. For me, you now have a situation where it is absolutely crystal clear what the ANC government and really its chums and the political elites are trying to do. It's rules for us and privileges for us, and the short end of the stick for everybody else. And when it comes to self-defense, and again, sorry to drum this point of self-defense, but for me, it's actually one of the more important ones, to be brutally honest, because it subdivides into other issues. You now have a situation where in this country, women, ever increasingly, were becoming the sort of people who are getting training, getting gun ownership, because they recognized the absolutely shocking levels of gender-based violence in this country. You had a situation where the more vulnerable segments of our society, I know you said something controversial, but I'll hold it back just to see how far I want to go with this. But there are vulnerable segments of our society who are the sort of people who depend on this, because a cop is nowhere near them. If you live in the middle of an informal settlement in Enyanga, which has the highest murder rate in the country, you being a legal firearm owner is it's not even a luxury, it's a necessity for you. Talk to me about the nefarious nature of this. What are politicians trying to do here, Dumo? Maybe there's something I'm not understanding.
Well, so I was on Facebook today, and there's a good friend of mine who said that basically we've been led by tavern intellectuals who like the idea that in their ideals, they want people not to own guns because, apparently more guns lead to more crimes and more violence and stuff like that. And as Nicolas mentioned earlier, that particularly isn't the case. Now, from a political ideological perspective, I think where the problem lies is that ultimately, if these amendments are made, the police are only going to be there to to see someone's dead body and just file a report, and then that's it. People won't have the ability to actually protect themselves. And this is basically what it is. If you want total government control, you need to disarm your citizens, because basically what you're going to do to them, your citizens will shoot you for it. And if they're unarmed, well, then it's easy pickings for the government. And of course, we can't allow that to happen.
Guys, I'm coming back to you, Gideon. Here's a government. I want to drive this, and no, we will not move on from this point, because and there's something I want the viewer to sort of get a sense of. I'm not just going to talk about this. I'm not just going to have a nice conversation on Liberty and Friends, and then good night, folks. Never trust a commie, and I'm out. No, this is a serious matter for me. It's one that resonates with the idea of preserving the family unit in this country. If the ubaba or the umama of a household is unable to defend the family, because politicians are moving towards a situation where we're disempowering the family unit, and really, I'm a classical liberal, I talk a lot about individuals, and these are individual rights, but yes, but this affects us as families. When politicians are coming after you and your family, I take it personally. And it's no more fun and games. There's no more giggling Big Daddy Liberty and cracking jokes every now and then. And that's what I was saying earlier on. I'm trying to keep it light because I can feel the anger well up inside of me. And it's a dangerous kind of anger. a very dangerous kind of anger, where it's one where politicians themselves will get harassed by me. And again, don't get me wrong, I'm not calling for violence against politicians or anything like that, but I'm calling for an action which I think I'll be a part of that gets more South Africans from a cross-section, whether it's your taxi driver who carries a rifle, a handgun for his protection because of the nature of the industry, or it is that father who I saw today when I was walking through the mall, holding his little daughter, talking about, I don't know, it was Paw Patrol or something like that. But I took a glance at his waist and I saw a nice Glock on his waist. And he carries that because he looks at his daughter and thinks, I must do this for you, my child. Or whether that's Umama. And yes, there are, by the way, who sell Zulu traditional gear in Durban. 2 or 3 of whom I know are packing. It is those individuals who politicians are coming after, and I'm taking it personally. I'm telling you now on the show so that there's no equivocation, there's no people going, why is Big Daddy going after these people so aggressively? You heard it here. It won't end here. I'm coming after these politicians, and I'm hoping you'll join me as I give more details on how we do that. Gideon, let me come back to you, because I know you're someone who's looking to do something on this issue, and you've been doing something on this issue. And even as I say that, shout out to Gun Owners South Africa, great organization. Okay, no, let me not do too many shout outs. Gideon, there is an urgent need for the average South African to actually wake the F up when it comes to not only this issue, but to also now begin to join the dots. The same politicians who say to us they're coming for your medical aid and your private healthcare and just your ability to access healthcare, and they want to centralize it and control it. The same politician who says, no, we're not getting rid of ESCOM. This will continue to be the status quo because we're eating off of this ESCOM. It's great for us, even though you're sitting in darkness. The same politician that says, no, we're coming for your land also, because really, EWC is the sort of power we must have as politicians. The same, guys, I can go down the list in terms of the actual threats that politicians have made to average South Africans. That same politician is now saying, I'm going to take away the ability that you have as a citizen to actually shoot back against the state. And yes, that sounds dramatic, but that's effectively what gun ownership and gun rights are all about. The ability of citizenry to defend themselves against a tyrannical government. America codified that in their constitution. And really, we call it a privilege here in South Africa, but in real terms, it's a right. It's a right to be able to defend yourself against the everyday petty criminal who's trying to mug, rape, or kill you. But it's also a right for you to defend yourself at the end of the day against politicians who may become tyrannical and do things that we don't want them to do. So, Gideon, let me come to you. That was a long monologue from me.
So there's a lot of things going on at the moment. There is a DASA public participation campaign. It launched right about midday, and I think we're already just over 5,000 participants in, which has been a very good start. At the same time, a whole bunch of organizations, I think the RR and Free Market Foundation are in. I know that AfriForum are in on this. Psi.org are in on it as well. Gun Owners SA have been leading the charge. A lot of the sports shooting and hunting organizations are piling in as well. So the groundswell is intensifying. We are going to organize, well, I don't know who we are yet. I'm organizing a march, or rather a protest in front of Parliament on Thursday, the 1st of July, for ordinary people to come and join us and make their voices heard at the center of legislative power in this country, to say we're not going to stand for this bullshit. Like, this is the line in the sand that you don't want to cross, and it's a stupid hill for you to pick to die on, but if you do, then so be it. So there will be a demonstration. There is going to be a whole bunch of other things flowing out of this, because as the coordinated response picks up speed, there will be additional things happening. But I'm happy to hear you're on board, and I think we should coordinate and get stuff done, because I can tell you the feedback I've gotten. The taxi associations are seething. The provincial ANC structures are seething. The MK Military Veterans Association is seething. Everyone in the ANC is pissed off from what I'm hearing. Some of their largest traditional supporters are pissed off at this. It's an absolutely horrendous move they made. I mean, our president spoke of the second pandemic of gender-based violence. What does he do? He makes it impossible for a woman to defend herself against a rapist, and then under his watch, his Minister of Police fucks the system up so badly that a rapist can commit rape. The forensic evidence will eventually not be connected to the crime, and his case will be thrown out because the police didn't pay the service provider. Cele refused to pay the service provider. So I'm like, the state is actively weaponizing their incompetence to turn ordinary South Africans into victims of murder, victims of rape, victims of tyranny. It is a tyranny. I don't know what else to call it.
And again, I must repeat this because there's a lot of people going to listen to us and get very frightened. And I must say this. There's no need for you to be frightened. There's no need for you to be frightened. We're not saying we're going to go, we're going to march into, we're going to trump it up and storm, Parliament, No, no one's saying that. But what we are saying is that it's critically important now that you find something that pisses you off. Find something that pisses you off that makes you say, you know what? No, I'm done. I'm drawing the line in the sand. Someone is going to hear from me. Someone is going to hear from me. And the me is a cross-section of who we are, South Africans. Gideon just mentioned the taxi guys. They're the ones who I actually had in mind in terms of speaking with, because I have a history in the taxi industry. I used to work in the taxi industry. I know some of these guys who are in this industry and why, for a lot of them, whatever you may particularly think of them as bad drivers on the road, but in an industry that is that dangerous, the ability for someone to just defend themselves, have the ability to defend themselves, they understand critically. And I can foresee a situation where there's 1,000 taxis rolling up on Parliament with angry drivers saying, here and no further. Good luck to any politician that wants to stand against that. Guys, we are hitting the 30-minute mark. Welcome to it if you're watching us. This is Liberty and Friends. I'm in conversation with Nicolas Lorimer from the Institute of Race Relations, daily friend contributor. Make sure you find him. There's also one half of the Two Crickets in a Thorn Bush podcast. Make sure you check that
Thorn
out.
Tree.
And of course, Thorn Tree. I always say bush.
Yes, Thorn Tree.
Why do I have bush on my mind? Anyway, let me move on from that one really swiftly. As I say that, I'm also in conversation with the host of the Manpatria show, that's Dumo. Denga, shout out to you, Dumo. And of course, Gideon, Joubert, the host of Paratus.info. Fellas, we've spent the half an hour on this particular issue. I think anybody who's watching understands now that obviously there's going to be a massive pushback. You mentioned the Institute of Race Relations. They spoke to me earlier on about pushing back on this issue. I will also support their efforts. I know AfriForum is busy with this. I'm going to be with them on this issue. Gideon, homie, you're my home dog. You know how it is. We want to push back on this one. Please be aware, dear South African, that there is going to be a massive pushback, and it's going to be very unpleasant for certain political elites. Let me move us on, fellas, if you don't mind, unless there's any final comments from the chaps. Okay, no hands at the moment. Give me a second, chaps. I'm just going back to my notes here. Apologies for looking this way. My laptop is here now. It's no longer in front of me. I'm regressing. I want to take a moment because it's linked to the notion of self-defense and how far one should go, and how when there isn't a limit, or rather when the state isn't playing its role, and when the state isn't doing what it should be doing in a cooperative manner with individuals, with communities, with families, how things can go bad and wrong very quickly in a rather macabre and lugubrious way. What am I talking about? This week, vlog 98, if I'm not mistaken, or 99, I went out to a little community, an informal settlement primarily, out here in Johannesburg, called Zandspruit. Zandspruit, of course, was in the news for all the wrong reasons, where 9 men were rounded up by the community in the early hours of the morning, plucked from their homes. These 9 men alleged, of course, to be gangsters in the area, and a community fed up with crime literally went to a local soccer pitch just opposite their taxi rank and proceeded to assault, beat these men viciously, and then burn them alive. Initially, 4 succumbed to their injuries on the spot, with 6 having gone to hospital, but now the death toll stands at 8. 8 people have now actually died from this. The latest, of course, from Minister Asshat himself, that's the police minister, Begi the Asshat Cele, was expressing concerns, he says, because that's what you need at a time like this when your cops are alleged by a community to be useless. He expresses concerns and says, if any of the cops were found to have been called to this incident and they didn't respond, he'll act on them. But here's what he's missing. Gideon, I'm going to come to you. Here's what he's missing. Where was the visible policing before this incident bubbled and boiled over to this point? Where was the policing that was cooperative, that works with community structures and actually addresses issues when communities bring alleged criminals or information to them? Where was the policing? Guys, there's something fundamentally wrong in a government that can't get policing right. Gideon?
And it's not a difficult thing to get right. I mean, one can start with the basics, which is the Pelian principles of policing. I think last time I counted, there were about 9 of them. The most important one being you can only police a community with its consent, and that your law enforcers are merely ordinary citizens that have on a professional and full-time basis concerned themselves with the duty of enforcing law and order in their community. That's the foundation from which it starts. But Tele is wholly unsuited to this job. He has proven that he is a knuckle-dragging buffoon that is only interested in swinging his scepter of power and through his krachtdadigheid enforcing his will upon others, regardless of what their opinions may be. The SAPS is also plagued with an extensive leadership problem in their top brass, and that in my opinion, you should purge pretty much 99% of SAP's management, kick them out the front door and investigate them and throw probably more than half of them in jail for the things that they've done. And, even take it further than that, a national police force in a country like ours doesn't work. Policing should have been federalized from 1994 onwards anyway.
Absolutely. Sorry, yeah, make your point.
Yeah, no. So it's none of the stuff is complex. None of it is stuff that hasn't been done before with great success elsewhere. But there's no political will because the police is not seen as a professional organization enforcing law and order. It is seen as a political tool to the benefit of the selected elites in the Thule House. And unfortunately, when you manage a organ of state responsible for law enforcement like they're your personal Gestapo, then this is the result that you get.
Absolutely. And let me come to this particular point, Nicolas, because, and I want to read the quote here. Just bear with me, fellas. I want to read the quote. So after the the provincial community safety MEC, let me just quickly find her name, Faith Mazibugo, visited the area and had a meeting at that same killing field with the community. And then the asshat himself also came and spoke to the local community policing forum and other leadership structures in this area. And this is what the community basically says, as is quoted in this Sowetan Live piece that I'm reading. They also reported to the police minister, that's the community, and the provincial police team that was obviously there with him, top brass, a show of force, that the local Honeydew police station, this is the police station that's closest to them, which also serves the Zandspruit area, of course, provides a poor service to the community. Here's the kicker. The claim that the local police are not only corrupt, but at times ignore their policing needs. Some in the meeting believe the death of the youngsters who were severely assaulted and burnt could have been avoided if police responded on time. Is that not just the absolute punch in the gut situation here, Nicolas? And as you mull it over, talk to me about the Institute of Race Relations, because you guys have been very vocal around what some of the interventions we can put in place that are desperately needed to get policing right. For example, that idea of local community members voting in the local station commander, like sheriffs, for example. Wouldn't something like that have just definitely solved a lot of the miscommunication problems in this particular area?
Yeah, that's, I think, definitely a good point. As was just said, the police force should have been federalized, but beyond that, it should have been made directly accountable to the communities that govern it. Now, sometimes you are going to have some problems there. Sometimes you're going to have bad figures taking over police stations. Sometimes you're going to have a community electing Attila the Hun as a police chief, which would not be great. But by and large, one of the problems here is that the police are demoralized, they're not supported properly, they're politically interfered with, and they're not held accountable. And without that link of accountability to the community, if police go to the scene of a crime, I mean, it's just their lives being at risk. They don't really, there's nothing really pushing them. The police captain is going to get promoted or demoted based on whether, he's fulfilling the right political checkboxes.
Mm-hmm.
But if he was accountable to his community, then they could exercise some control over him. They could say, you're not doing a good job. You haven't dealt with these guys who are alleged to be gang members for this long, and so we're going to remove you and replace you with someone else. It would give a mechanism for people, ordinary people, to have a very direct influence on their policing, which would definitely help to build that consensus, that consent, that a community needs, that Gideon talked about there. And this is the most fundamentally basic role of a state. The first thing a state must do before anything else is provide law and order, provide safety, protect people from coercion. Because if it doesn't do that, you get what is not only, I think all South Africans probably sympathize a little bit with this kind of horrific vigilantism. But there's two things that are absolutely awful about it. One is that it's so incredibly cruelly painful, unprocedural, and crazy. And on the other hand, it opens the door for basically new gangs to form. For someone in the community who wants to make a name for himself, carrying out a vigilante attack and saying, I'm the new law around town. And then basically the country is just ruled by warlords. And that's, once you get there, there's no chance for families, individuals, or anyone to have a good life.
Yes, Dumo, even as I listen to Nicolas speak on this issue, I also can't but help feel sorry for a lot of police men and women, especially the ones who are the most devoted people. They wake up day in, day out, put on that vest, put that gun on their holster, and head out into an environment which they know is some of the most violent in the world. Our police officers are facing down, armed bandits, often with AK-47s looking to hit cash vans, for example. That same police officer, because I don't want to be too critical of the individuals. I think our police individuals, the vast majority of them, are actually very devoted and they want to do their jobs. Gideon rightly said that it's the management and the political oversight of the police that is absolute trash in this country. Speak to me about the need, perhaps, for police reform. Some of the ideas that, for example, the IRR has flouted is, things like, empowering communities, for instance, to take greater control of their safety in the area, bringing in the private sector, which has clearly demonstrated it can do a much better job at just visible policing. And so far as if you drive into a community, 9 times out of 10, you're more likely to sue a private security vehicle than a SAPS car. Speak to me about the need for innovation in this particular space and what we can do to empower the individual and really families.
Right. So it's a nice topic, innovation. And also with regards to safety, I think we can come up with really great ideas on that. So, the first thing really is, maybe just speak to a local security company to actually, take care of the community and guard it. So even where I used to live, there was a time when there was a high crime rate and someone actually decided to knock on door to door and say, hey, look, don't you want to join our group? We are a safety group and we ask this company to look after us and stuff like that. And that occurred, and the community is much safer as a result. So I think, the private sector has a lot to offer in this field. And even when you look on these community groups as well, when they catch criminals who try to steal cars and stuff, and then the criminals are hiding their face or their faces are planted on the ground while they are handcuffed. They got photos saying, listen, we caught this guy. He was trying to do A, B, C, and D, and he was in this car, and this car is linked to 5 other hijackings or something like that. So the police, not the police, but the private security companies actually do assist the police who are in desperate need of help. Because as Gideon said, it should have been federalized a long time ago. I think that, Bheki Cele is too far away from the problems. He's way too far away. He can't be called every time something goes wrong. Like I remember the one time in KZN, there was a dispute between farmers and the workers, and then he came in there to mediate. Like, no, you shouldn't be there. The local community should be figuring that out from the get-go. I don't know why Peggy Taylor seems to be this guy that's supposed to solve everything. He can't. I mean, didn't the police commissioner say that that the police doesn't have enough capacity to fulfill its mandate?
That's
okay,
right.
So if it doesn't, then why is Peggy Taylor going to each and every crime scene? Like, this is crazy. Like, why must Peggy Taylor go there? Like, don't they have other cops?
Dude, it's the hat. It's the ass hat. He's trying to butt in. Get it? Ass hat.
Yes.
All right. Maybe that one lost me a little bit. But let me come back to you, Gideon, because there's a particular point I want to chew on here before we move on, and it links perhaps to another issue. You rightly mentioned that a lot of the problems we have as South Africans, the crime rates that we're dealing with, and the growing gap between police management and the political accountability over policing stems from the fact that policing is run by a minister who sits in Pretoria. And your local police officer who is with you here in Honeydew or Bofadder reports to that asshole and not to you as a local community. There's a lot of swearing on this show tonight. Let me just apologize to my listeners. Often we don't swear this much. But a lot of the problems are because your local police station commander, and really the police officers there, report to people who sit in Pretoria and not to you as a local community. Therefore, there is a conversation about which direction we should have gone and which direction we should go in right now. Should we federalize policing or should we remain with the status quo? With that being said, there's currently a police amendment. Excuse me, let me just quickly read that properly. Yes, I'm right. A police amendment bill which will sit before Parliament in August that basically addresses this particular issue. And what it seeks to do in reality is actually go in the current, not only take the status quo, but double down on it. It's looking to, for example, eliminate a lot of, and I stand on correction here, but to basically centralize more of policing and to even eliminate aspects of local government policing, which has often been metro cops, for example. The DA has been up in arms on this particular issue. Kudos to them, because they're also arguing that actually policing needs to be federalized. They, as a province, for example, because they run they run one province and a lot of municipalities. They argue that actually policing should be a provincial competency and at best a local, and retaining, of course, local and metro policing too. Talk to me about this chasm. It is a debate which I think we need to have, and South Africans need to get involved in.
So just to pile in straight away, this doubling down of centralization seems to be a theme of the ANC's 27 years of governance, and it's a theme that they're not letting go of, even though the wheels are quite literally coming off every single project of centralization they have. I mean, Eskom is probably by the grace of God alone keeping the lights on, which is not the sort of thing. I mean, the Mango CEO basically said exactly that. But I mean, the SA Mango are existing thanks to a government printing press. I don't even know how we still have electricity in this country. Waterworks everywhere are in a state of significant disrepair. I mean, Swartregens and Koster again, the courts gave the management of that waterworks back to the municipality, and 1 day later the taps have run dry. The sewage running into the Fall River. I mean, we can be here all night. It's like bingo. You mention an SOE, and then we all have a drink if it's a complete mess, and we will all be dead, but with alcohol poisoning by tomorrow. And the idea of saying, okay, but with the sterling reputation and track record of mismanagement that they are so committed to, it's an art form. Let's take a really bad thing, which is policing, that is it's so in its murren that we are having people just doing vigilante mob justice, and that's just one example. Let's take that and make it worse. Let's double down. Let's take away functioning metro cops, functioning municipal police functions, and we throw that into the same pit that can't even keep more than 2 vans running in Somerset West that has a population of 80 to 100,000. 2 vans must service that entire Helderberg basin, and I mean there are rural police stations that have no vehicles, and this is the success story.
And let me come in here because, Nicolas, there's something to be said, isn't there? Because I think the average citizen who's listening to this broadcast right now is probably thinking, yay, man, yay. What is this filthy politician looking to, what are they fixing to do to me? If on the one hand, through incompetence, they're weakening the police in terms of it being a law enforcement agency. On the other hand, because of ideology, they're turning policing and the policing function into almost a private policing club where VIP policing in this country gets wonderful amounts of resources to protect politicians, but for ordinary people, there are actual budget cuts in some police stations across the country. And then the third ambit is in terms of questioning, what is this filthy politician looking or fixing to do to me? They're then taking away my ability to defend myself with what I believe is a right, i.e. gun rights, but really in this country is a privilege. Talk to me about the psyche of what this does to South Africans.
Yeah, it's completely disempowering. You know, people will feel helpless. If you can afford it, people will try and get private security. And one of the interesting things to me about this is actually how these plans of centralization are so far removed from the reality on the ground that, for example, I know that in a lot of middle-class suburbs in South Africa, in the CPFs and in other ways, the police basically share policing authority capabilities with private security. Now, that's not supposed to happen, but that's kind of what does happen just because that's how they get things done. It's one of the reasons why there's less crime in some of those areas. Mm-hmm. And so if, you know, whatever rules they make in Cape Town and Pretoria, it's not going to change that fact that the lack of state capacity has actually weakened things. And, you know, I guess the rationale for centralizing is to try and, you know, because the fear is always when something is federal, that crime, gangs, or local interests or whatever will overwhelm the command structures there and kind of take control of the police, you know, like the gangs were infiltrated or something. That's already happened at the highest levels, and so it's going to really strip people of their ability to do anything, and so you get, you know, extra legal actions like this, like these vigilante killings, which aren't actually reported in the media that much, but they're very common. I mean, I think the Institute of Security Studies said there were 903 vigilante killings this in the last year. I saw also the murder stats also have it in the hundreds. So it's a very significant part, even actually, of our official murder statistics. And it's a problem that's only going to get worse if the police are centralized more, if the police are undermined by political appointments, if the police are undermined by a lack of accountability and resources, of course.
Absolutely.
But we've got to give money to SA, apparently.
Guys, if you're just watching, welcome to it. We're in the it's what, sort of 10 minutes to 9 o'clock. I'm in conversation with the fellas here. Just a reminder to you, if you're wondering where Unathi is, she had technical difficulties and couldn't join us. Guys, get your questions in, and your comments in. I will put them up on screen. And remember, guys, hit that like button. There's about 244 of us collectively who are watching, but only 78 likes across the platforms. Guys, right now, as you're listening, as you're watching, hit them likes. Get my likes up, people. Come on now. And Dumo, let me come to you. I want to move us on a little bit conversation-wise. Pardon me, guys, for the sound. I want to move us on a little bit. There's something to be said about the state of things and the sort of news headlines we've seen this week. It's been an almost frustrating week of ever increasingly people seeing that there is a real difference between life as a South African if you're a politician and if you're in the political elite, and your life if you're an ordinary chap on the street. Let me be precise and specific and bring in my douchebag extraordinaire, one Jacob Zuma, who's currently, of course, finally before the courts, but is playing this weird game, and I suppose a very strategic game, called the Stalingrad technique of basically delaying and fighting a new battle somewhere else, creating a new battle, and creating a situation where people are beginning to question whether justice will be served at all with this guy. The latest, of course, being his gambit of seeking the recusal of the prosecutor in his case. I can't find that particular prosecutor's name. Okay, I can't really find the name. My notes have just closed on me. But again, just another delaying tactic of Zuma looking for now the recusal of the prosecutor.
Yeah, I'm not surprised by this. I mean, he's been doing this for many years. So I think this is just something that his legal team has advised. And I think what they're going to do is they're going to use each and every legal loophole to delay the case as much as they can. Of course, this person should have been prosecuted back in 2009, and now it's 2021. And of course, he's going to make it as difficult as possible to get prosecuted. And what is very interesting is that every time he makes a court appearance, he goes outside and he's got a lot of supporters that he speaks to as well, and he tells them a different story, like they're after me and everything like that, and all of that. That's the same story that he told many of the communists back when Mbeki fired him as the deputy president of the country. So I think for me now, Zuma's just in a position where he doesn't have that much long to live. I'm not saying he's going to die tomorrow, but he doesn't have that much long, and he's going to try and delay it as much as possible. And this could actually take years to get finalized.
And for me, that's the slightly frightening part. And I just saw Overlanding mentioning that the prosecutor's name is Billy Downer. Thanks, Overlanding, for that. But, you have a situation now where you have a guy who, and here's the kicker here. And Nicolas, I want to come to you. Here's the kicker. It's not so much that he demands or is requesting demands. He actually demand the recusal of this lead prosecutor. His actual threat is that, you know what, if this guy is not recused from my case, I'm just not going to come to court. In what democracy, Nicolas, do you know of anybody, especially an ordinary ordinary Joe like you and I, do you think you and I could have the ability to say, well, if you don't recuse this person, I'm just not going to appear in court? Why does it seem as if our political elites just get these wonderful privileges that the rest of us don't get?
Right. There's a real attack now on the rule of law and on law and order. And Zuma, Zuma using the Stalingrad tactic to a certain degree, it's really bad, obviously, but it's not as bad as his refusal to go to court. The Stalingrad tactic is at least using the system, right? It's using the system, it's using the loopholes, it's using the rights that we grant to people who are awaiting trial or facing trial to kind of get out of it. But what's really scary to me actually is the Zondo Commission stuff, and the fact that he was, called to appear before them, and then he just said no. And then he said, make me. And then no one made him. The senior leadership of the ANC went and had a meeting with him where he said, guys, I'm really being put upon. I think Cyril Ramaphosa in that meeting said something like, I still look up to you as my leader, which seems a bit insincere to me, but whatever. And that really is a break in the constitutional system. If someone can be ordered by the highest court in the land to appear before a commission, and he says no, and nothing happens. In fact, the Minister of Police goes to visit him instead and has a conversation where they make a joke about arresting him and then do nothing. Apparently that was what happened when Bheki Cele went to visit Zuma. They sort of went, ha ha ha, you're here to arrest me. No, I just want tea. It is damaging in a very serious way to the fabric of society, and it is exactly the kind of thing that will pull apart South African society at the seams.
Yeah, okay, all right. I'm sorry, there's something I want to say, but I'm just sort of disciplining myself and thickening the filter between my mind and my mouth so that I don't actually say this thing, because, again, there's a real frustration from my side. There's a real frustration from my side because this guy has been, for a good part of 15 years, demanding that he have his day in court. Demanding that, just because my buddy was found guilty on a charge that the judge says we're both complicit in, doesn't mean that I'm guilty. Yes, Nicolas?
Can I just remind everyone that Shabir Sheikh, I believe, is still out on death row, medical parole, or whatever.
I was going there. That man, for a man who we're told by doctors is terminally ill, it's just a matter of time, they told us. That homie has been golfing it up and eating Italian food out in Durban like there's no tomorrow. It is fantastic. Like I now know if I'm about to be on my death's door, I'm just going to go play golf. That'll buy me years, clearly. But Dumo, let me come back to you because there is an important issue here, an underlying issue that I think we're kind of joking about, but really it's a serious one, which is the idea of the rule of law and how if ordinary people don't see the politicians, for example, taking the law seriously, or even the law itself acting on those politicians, it erodes. It completely erodes people's, firstly, consent to be policed, law enforcement, and secondly, people wanting to even follow the law. And then it ties up to something like a Zandspruit mob justice situation where people feel like the law just is not here to serve them because they're not in the elites.
Right. You know, I was watching a Louis Theroux documentary, and that documentary, they were talking about mob justice, and then there was a guy by the name of William, and I don't know if you know the conversation. It's a very famous conversation where he actually justified why he actually participates in mob justice, and in the conversation, he was just mentioning how it doesn't matter what I do. I take this guy to the police station. I take the criminal to the police station. The criminal gives one of the cops 20 rand. He's back the next day. You know, you take him to court, they delay it, he's back, and everything like that. And so it's not even happening at the highest levels. You even see just among normal community members, they've also lost hope in the police and the justice system, and decided to take the law into their own hands. That's not to say that they should be doing it, but it's a sign of frustration. And now we've got Zuma right at the top. I mean, he's just making demands left, right, and center, and nothing is happening to him. So it's rotten from the top to the bottom. And I just feel that like Zuma knew this from the get-go, that it is rotten, right? And you know, he's not the first person, because even that William guy that I mentioned earlier, he also knew it was rotten, and that's why he took the law into his own hands. So when you have a rotten police system, the politicians who know it's corrupt know they can't get prosecuted, and the citizens that need assistance from the police, they just say, well, the police are useless anyway. Let me take the law into my own hands, and that is not a good situation to be in.
And I must say this, I'm going to make it a little bit personal. But before any of that, we're nearly at the 9 p.m. mark, which means it's only 30 minutes left in the show. Welcome to it. If you're maybe just joining us, welcome. You're a bit late, but Sabona, you're now here. I'm in conversation with Dumo Denga, the host of the Manpatria podcast. Of course, I'm also in conversation with Nicolas Lorimer, excuse me, I had to burp. Kombucha came back on me at the wrong time. Nicolas Lorimer, who of course is an analyst and a writer at the Daily Friend and at the Institute of Race Relations. And last but definitely not least, brother Gideon Joubert, who is the host of the Paratus.info show. My go-to guy, as I say, for all things gun and gun rights related. Fellas, as we look to the final 30 minutes of the show and we wind it down a little bit, and I'll start bringing in some viewers' questions if there are any. One of the things I wanted to talk about, because we've sort of mentioned it sporadically here and there, as the show took on a very particular theme, I suppose, which was law enforcement, the failure around it, and really the threats by politicians to our ability as citizens to defend ourselves. But there is another threat that reared its ugly head this past week after the Health Professions Council of South Africa appeared before Parliament with its chairperson, Dr. Nimatandani. And in a weird ideological fit of rage, then proceeded to go on a rant about how they, as the HPCSA, goodness me, or the Health Professions Council, are in favor of not only the national health insurance, but listen to this. This is the kicker from Dr. Nimatandani. He basically argues the following, that not only is the HPCSA in favor of the national health insurance, they argue that the private funds from medical aids currently, so if you are a person who's on a medical aid, whether you're on the most expensive plan or the cheapest, and you contribute every month to a big kitty, a big pool, a risk pool that your insurer then uses to pay for all of the medical bills, the state, or excuse me, the HPCSA is saying that no. Those funds need to be confiscated and put into the NHI fund so that that money, this wonderful big pot of money, goody gumdrops, can then be used by us, the politicians, used by us, the government bureaucrats, in deciding what healthcare you can get under a single healthcare system called the NHI, or the National Health Insurance. This is being spoken of by the politicians at the moment. They're greatly in favor of this. Surprise, surprise. These are the same people who run ESCOM. But what they're basically proposing here, Nicolas, is the ESCOM of healthcare. Tell me how this is such a wonderful idea. Or am I, or excuse me, tell me why this is a bad idea, or am I wrong, Nicolas?
Yeah, it is a really bad idea. There's obviously, I think, sort of more ideological arguments we could make about this, about how centralizing decision-making in a bureaucracy is going to cause problems. And that's true for any country in the world. And also how basically, in some cases, abolishing prices will lead to rationing, which is one of the things that NHI would do, right? Is that people would overuse some services and underuse others, and so it would create all sorts of inefficiencies that will result in people basically standing in lines waiting for treatment. So that's a kind of more, I guess, ideological take on this. But let me just step back and say, from a sort of non-ideological point of view, are they mad? Like, even if you think that the state in, I don't know, Switzerland is capable of running a system like this, like something similar to this, I think. There isn't, corruption entrenched in every part of government there. There isn't fighting constantly over political patronage. Think about if you are the health minister, what the amount of power you will suddenly get to wage internal ANC battles and pay off factions and create a patronage network. If every single medical contract and service basically has to pass at some point through somewhere in your office, the opportunities for corruption, for outright looting, are going to be incredible. And unless we put a stop to NHI, the healthcare system in South Africa is really going to fail. One of the first things people do when they enter the sort of middle class, the moment they have a stable income or something, is they go and they buy private healthcare. Because state hospitals are so badly run, are so under-resourced, and have all these other problems. People are desperate to escape the state-run healthcare sector. And government is now taking the medical aid schemes, which has allowed millions of people, often who are not that wealthy, to actually escape the public sector, will now suddenly have their opportunity to get into private healthcare really restricted. And
So, sorry, I was about to say, just to corroborate your point and agree with it, and really to expose what is one of the greatest hypocrisies. And again, I'm not blaming the people. Just before I even say what I'm about to say, I'm not blaming the people. They're acting within their interest, within their self-interest, and they're rational. And the point I was going to make is, even government employees will go out of their way to avoid the very same healthcare system that they run. Government employees have a medical aid called GEMS, and I can bet my bottom dollar that the vast majority of spending that GEMS does is not at public health facilities, but rather at private ones, so that even the very state employees themselves avoid the services that the politicians are now going to make mandatory for every single South African. Gideon, let me come to you, because I think there is a conversation to be had here. And I want to bring you in here and let me personalize this thing so that people understand just how much of a cluster F putting healthcare into the hands of politicians will be. Right now, as we speak, if I was still back home in Mlazi and I was shot or I was stabbed by the same mugger who I now can't shoot back at because the state has taken my gun or my ability to defend myself away, and I didn't have a medical aid, I would have to go to a hospital called Prince Mshieni Hospital, which annoys me because it's named after a prince who I respect, a Zulu prince who I deeply respect. He was the King Regent at the time during the transition between... anyway, sorry, I digress. Point is, I will be taken to Prince Mshieni Hospital. Prince Mshieni has gotten a reputation in my township of Umlazi. Because Mshieni, the Zulu word Mshieni, regardless of the guy's name, means leave him. People have now basically taken that name and said, well, yeah, that's fitting for that hospital, because that is the leave him to die hospital. That is literally the expression that is now used to describe this hospital. that individual who lives them lives will be forced to use Mshieni, and there will be no option for them to escape that, even if they had a medical aid. Talk to me how this is actually something that will affect the poor, especially the aspirational poor, who, as Lorimer said, work their butts off to try and afford their first medical aid to escape all of this.
Well, even worse. So a great number of state hospital patients end up in private healthcare because a lot of private doctors, a lot of private hospitals actually take on these patients, either with contractual agreements with provincial or local governments, or because out of charity. These things happen. There are people without medical aids that do benefit directly and indirectly from the existence of a robust private healthcare system. Firstly, that healthcare system takes the weight off of the public healthcare sector. So it means those patients don't have to go to the poorly maintained, badly funded, badly resourced, understaffed public healthcare facilities. They are paying patients in private healthcare facilities. And there's also a lot of innovation that occurs in private, that there are externalities that the public healthcare sector benefit from the other way around. Now, you demolish private healthcare. Firstly, why the hell would anyone want to go to medical school in this country? Because you are essentially doomed to be an overworked state medical slave drone. So you're either going to go to med school and hope to get a job overseas, which is getting harder and harder as our qualifications are deemed to be of lower and lower quality with every passing year. And you can't go into private because there is no private sector left. So yeah, I don't see the best and the brightest sticking around to study medicine in SA, and their skills and their contributions will be lost. It will be a complete fuck up. There is no other way to put it.
All right, another F-bomb on the show. Welcome to it. This is a Big Daddy Liberty show, Liberty and Friends. Tonight we are swearing with Gideon. Just kidding. But no, you're right, dude. It worries me. It deeply worries me. And Dumo, I'm going to come to you, because some of us who come from poor backgrounds, some of us who come from poor families, work our asses off, not just to buy medical aid for ourselves, but to buy medical aid and private health insurance for the parents who gave us the opportunity to escape the poverty that we maybe grew up with. I now, that same chap who's worked my ass off to be able to afford medical aid, to give my granny or Uma a better healthcare, especially as we're ailing and we're getting older. I now am limited, and I am now actually not allowed. I'm just trying to gather my thoughts here. I'm now disallowed from doing what I believe is in the best interest of my family, and to give my mom and myself the best options, because some politician in Pretoria believes that I don't deserve that right to have the freedom to choose. Please speak to me about the ideological impulse behind politicians who are actually trying to do this, and why it's important for them to do this, the NHI that is.
That's a great question and great comment. So I just saw in one of the comments there by Obi-Wan, who says "Mshieni afe," which means just leave him and to die. And this is basically Mshieni afe. So basically, that's like that's the whole practical conclusion of everything, is that you're going to get someone in Pretoria who's going to decide your fate. Someone's going to, like, the doctor's going to come to you and say, you need to get surgery X. And then now this has to be approved by someone, who sits in a desk in Pretoria. And he says, no, you can't get that because it's too expensive. Rather give him, pills and stuff like that. And then as a result, what happens is that you don't really get the treatment you need. And I remember the one time I had a debate on Twitter with one commie who's saying that, look at the Canadian healthcare system. They spend less per patient than another system. And I'm like, well, of course. I mean, if you're controlling the whole thing, you can just pay nothing and just say, woo, guys, this is great. But this is how crazy it has become, is that, people don't really understand the implications of it, because how the government sells it, or those who extol it, they like to say that it's free healthcare and everything like that. But it really isn't
free.
It really isn't free. Taxpayers are paying for it, and the government is taking most of the money, and it's becoming inefficient. So I think from a freedom perspective, you need to, even if you, let's say, can't afford medical aid, you got to fight against the NHI, because I mean, many people, again, who are close to these hospitals. I mean, I know some people who live in the township, and they tell me, Dumo, I'm not going to go to the local clinic there. These guys can't help me. I'd rather go to Mill Park or something like that, because at least there I can get assisted. It may be expensive, but hey, there'll be someone there. So I think I think that the current state of state hospitals is terrible, and not everyone wants to be there. And remember, this week, I mean, at Helen Joseph's, they didn't have water. Someone had to order water privately into his own room just to have water, and took a photo. And I was like, and I'm like, okay, commies, like, can you not see it? Like, can you not see this thing will not work? But people are so in love with ideology and feeling good about themselves and virtue signaling that they can't see the practical implications, and that's very unfortunate. And also with this health practitioners as well. I mean, these guys know nothing about economics, man. The guys just there preaching, trying to show how virtuous he is and everything like that. No, you must just sit down. You must sit down and not speak again. You're a healthcare practitioner. You're not the one that's doing all the complicated equations, trying to see, who should get how much someone should charge on how much they should get covered. You're not that actuary guy, who actually is looking out into the market and seeing what actually people need treatment for. They're not doing that. They're just virtue signaling. And honestly, I don't even know why they even gone to parliament. In fact, why aren't they calling economists? Why aren't they calling like the guys that draw up the policies and say, listen, the policies are too restrictive. We can't create competitive packages. That's why people are not getting covered in this country. If you look at the minimum benefits clause that was drawn up by the CMS, those guys, I mean, no one's talking about that. I mean, like, even I'll tell you one personal story. I've got an eye condition, right? I could have saved my vision many years ago, but I have to rely on contact lenses, and it's very difficult. Without my lenses, I can't even drive, right? But basically, if it wasn't for the CMS and their restrictive policies, I would have got the correct treatment that I needed at that time many years ago. Now I'm probably going to have to wait, and my eyes are going to get worse, and I'm going to need a corneal transplant, which is very expensive, and so forth. But this is what happens. This is what happens when people that are too far away from the problem are making the law. And they're just going to virtue signal. So that's my rant.
And your rant is spot on, and it rides off what Unobi is now saying in the comments here. Remember, guys, send your comments through. I will put them on screen. If you arrive at 4 a.m. at Msheni Hospital, this is my local hospital back in Mlazi, my home township, you're actually too late. And he's damn right. I can attest to this. There have been many mornings where we have to scramble to get to the hospital, so that we can be there to join the queue from as early as 4 a.m. And why? Because of a point that Nicolas made, but often is not seen because it's not. It is an easy to hide element, which is once you have the state run something, and the state being inefficient at it, the inefficiencies trickle down into actual service delivery. There is a reason why there is a shortage of doctors in that hospital. It isn't just because of no one wants to work in public or blah blah blah. The reason being the management of that facility is absolutely shocking. Therefore, there is an incentive by a doctor to work elsewhere and set up maybe even a private practice in that same township, which becomes oversubscribed. If there's one thing that I've seen an explosion of, especially in my home township, and really in townships across the country, is the explosion of private healthcare providers. Just the local doctor who sets up a small little hooky a shop in his area, charges rates that are reflective of the income levels of the people who live there. He makes a profit because he does this, and at the same time the community is able to access, obviously with a little bit of saving because we are a bit poorer, but still able to access a quality doctor and not have to wait in a line where there's literally 400 or 500 people in front of you. And I'm not exaggerating. There can be 400 people ahead of you in a line. So you rock up at 4 a.m., but you only see the doctor at 2 p.m. Again, also because not just because of the line, but also because of triaging. So as people come in maybe with a worse injury, like a gunshot wound or so, whatever the case may be, they will get priority and be seen first, and not you, the person who's been in that line since 4 a.m. Where am I going with all of this? Nicolas, as I look to you, is to bring up the notion of the private sector and the importance, therefore, of the private sector actually leading the charge in healthcare, or in the healthcare future of South Africa. Let me be precise and specific. You guys, as the Institute of Race Relations, have had a conversation about this by proposing, for instance, health vouchers. The idea being that, yes, there are poor South Africans, and those poor South Africans could definitely need some help by the state in healthcare, but that healthcare doesn't have to be provided by the state. The state can give a voucher to an individual for that individual to then buy their own medical aid. Why is this idea so resisted by the likes of Dr. Nematandani from the Health Professions Council, who wants to control healthcare himself?
I think the generally stated reason is that these things are unfair. They prioritize certain people. People will spend their healthcare voucher in the wrong place if they get one, or if they go for private medical aid like we have now, then some people don't benefit from that. But of course, the irony is that policies like NHI, which sort of nationalize all medical aids, will actually create more inequality, because the sort of middle classes and low middle classes will not be able to afford private, any kind of private treatment. They'll have to rely on NHI because NHI will tax them more and demand mandatory contributions. But the super elite, the sort of, the Cyril Ramaphosa's, the multi-billionaires, that kind of group, they can go overseas, they can pay whatever needs to be paid. So you will continue to have the two-tier system of healthcare that a lot of people in government complain about. In fact, you'll make the problem even worse. But if you had something like healthcare vouchers, you could begin to develop a proper free market in healthcare. Now, there's very few countries in the world that do have a proper free market in healthcare. Even the US, you can't really characterize it as a proper free market in healthcare. But what you ideally want is for patients to be able to use their buying power, even if they're very poor, and that's where the voucher comes in. Basically, the government subsidizes their buying choices, to be able to punish and reward producers of healthcare stuff in exchange for the provision of those services. So if you have that, you have good competition, you have innovation, you have all these good things that drive a healthcare system. If you don't have that, you have what South Africa has. The South African government is committed to handing out however many million vaccines, and then it keeps shifting the goalposts, moving them, changing their minds. No, guys, we didn't really mean we were going to vaccinate every healthcare worker. We actually meant most of them, because it was only a trial. And when you actually go to do something like that, you have to stand in a queue for hours. You keep baking the sun. People jump the queue in front of it. I know someone who went to one of those centers, and government officials all just sort of jumped the queue in front of the people who'd been waiting in line, the old people. So, unless we decentralize the system, like in police, we're going to get more bureaucratic incompetence and more arbitrary cruelty from government bureaucrats and central control. Absolutely. And
there's a comment that was on the screen by Shahid David. I'll bring it back on. So it's a comment by Shahid David that's saying, sorry, let me just find it, my bad. Gideon, I want to bring it to you, but, I'll just put it on the screen now. He says, look, even the services of private hospitals are deteriorating. And as I sort of just to prompt it, I think he's not necessarily wrong, but he might be not seeing that even at the private facilities that we have now, a lot of the reasoning for why there may be a deterioration in the services is the lack of competition because of the state regulation in private healthcare. For instance, number one, we don't have much of a market, an open market in private healthcare. It's kind of a boys' club of a few providers. I mean, you have two major hospital groups in this country, Netcare and the Life Group, and really other smaller ones, but really stifled by the regulation. And one of the things that Nicolas just raised now as a desperately needed thing is competition, to address even a comment like this.
Well, to be honest, it's getting worse, because both MediClinic and Life are pushing aggressively to force radiologists to sell out their practices and essentially become employees of these hospital groups, as opposed to being partners that own their own practices with their own associates, manage their own affairs, and then basically pay rent to these hospitals and hospital groups. They want to take the radiologists' independence away and essentially turn them into wage slaves, where people who have no idea what running a radiological practice involves will dictate the equipment they're allowed to use, will dictate maintenance schedules, will dictate their rosters they're supposed to work, will remove their independence, their quality of life, and pay them a salary as opposed to them earning their own money and paying themselves what they believe to earn. And this is an aggressive push. And from what I've heard, the Radiological Society of South Africa is strongly opposing it on all fronts, and that they are fighting this thing tooth and nail. But again, it's because of the oligopolistic nature of the medical industry, private medical industry, where you have Life and you have Mediclinic, and they are behaving like complete monopolists in this case, like little jumped up tyrants. Yes, you do get very good, superb independent hospitals like Zuid-Afrikaanse Hospital in Pretoria, which is a wonderful hospital. I do believe the Mellomed group is up and coming down in the Cape. It's well established, and I'm hoping that they become a major contender, and I'm hoping that there are other hospital groups that do the same thing. But again, lack of competition, spot on comment, as well as the fact that we do have a significant brain drain that is happening in real time. So you are stuck with fewer people with fewer skills, and this does translate into lower levels of service. And that is a problem.
Absolutely. It is a massive problem, and it's one which we're going to take with us into the future, especially as maybe a final gasp, guys, because I'm just keeping an eye on time, especially because it's set to get worse for two reasons. One, politicians and political elites who, like Dr. Nema Tandani, where the story began, the chairperson of the Health Professions Council of South Africa, basically saying, oh yes, he says, we definitely need the nationalization of healthcare in this country, for healthcare to be run by the state, and for us to confiscate money currently sitting in the private funds of citizens who are on medical aid and put that money into the state coffers for politicians to decide on how they spend their cash. That's the kind of rhetoric we're hearing from the political elites. Even as ordinary citizens are saying, actually, no, give us more options, give us more freedom to choose. And then for those of us who are poorer in society, support us to be able to buy these private options. I raise this issue of it getting worse because those oligopolies you mentioned, Gideon, are also themselves very in favor of the patronage that will come from a system like the NHI. The Netcare Group, Discovery, Life, these are the sort of people who have extolled the virtues, they said, of an NHI, especially Discovery, because of the potential for them to be named the administrator of this NHI system. So it's a tender. They're tenderpreneurs, or they're looking at this from the vantage of being potential tenderpreneurs. And they're looking at this, Nicolas, and they're going, oh, goody, a nice fat tender for me in Discovery or whatever the case may be. So of course I'll support the state, even with a policy as bad as this one.
Right. I mean, there's this kind of myth out there that the corporations, man, they're all colluding together to create the free market. It's not really true, is it? Businesses, especially very big businesses, tend to be very against genuine competition because it hurts their potential to make money. And so they get on board with a government plan like this. Maybe some of it is driven by fear because they want to be the one who gets appointed the administrator because they know some people are going to lose out. But the other reason is because I think, if all the rules are skewed in front of the big players, because big players can absorb costs imposed by government through regulation much better, then, we're going to benefit from this, and no smaller competitors, no small practices, no small, medical aid schemes or anything are going to take us out. So they get on board with these programs and then they sell out ordinary South Africans. So I think it's actually important for ordinary South Africans to hold their medical aids and such to account and say, what is your stance on NHI? And if they are in support of it, cancel with them and let them know that's why you cancel with them.
Absolutely. I'm sorry, I just muted myself there. Absolutely, you're spot on. And again, Dumo, let me end with you on this particular point. the importance, brother, of competition. Like I can't begin to stress this enough, and how South Africans themselves have to be the sort of people who say, actually, no, stop regulating these industries, whether it's healthcare or whatever, transport, or whatever it may be. Stop regulating them to death. Rather encourage the competition that allows me, the poor chap, the option to have a service provider that wants to cater to us, the poorer segment. For example, we have multiple retail chains in this country, and because of the competition amongst them, they also now develop strategies to say, okay, let's develop a new brand that goes after poorer residents and gives them quality products. So, for example, Pick n Pay will have Boxer retail stores that are literally for lower LSM groupings, but gives them quality, and I mean quality stuff to buy at their income level. Equally, you go up all the way to your premium high woofy type person who shops at Woolies or whatever the case may be. The point being, if that can happen at a supermarket level and a retail level, it's the same principle. The market principle is the same one that can be applied in healthcare or education or whatever the case may be, where poor people are given the option, the freedom to be able to choose a service because there's some entrepreneur who's willing to do the hard work and reach that poor particular individual. Your thoughts?
Right. No, that is great. I think that with regards to competition, it is very important. And the only way we're going to get that is through deregulation. Right now, if you look at the healthcare sector in this country, it's highly regulated. Therefore, innovation cannot be achieved that easily. I mean, I can imagine ways in which doctors can actually provide services to people that they need them at a very low rate. If they were just allowed to do so. There are many great ideas out there, and the government should be allowed, and the government should just say, look, let's just deregulate and get these ideas flowing, because right now our competition is not that great. Our hospital systems, there's not enough competition there. That's why one person even said that the private hospitals are deteriorating. So that's not a good thing. There were actually innovative solutions that came through. There was one company that actually decided to sell a voucher. And if you don't have a medical aid, you can actually use that voucher to go see a doctor. And then apparently that was fought by the regulator. And this is what I'm saying. The regulators, they're kind of like the enemy here. They don't see that they actually are hindering innovation. We need to get these guys into one room and say, listen, as a citizen, allow me to take the risk for my health. You don't have to look after me, CMS. You don't have to look after me, government. I will take that chance. If I want to go to a doctor that's charging me so much, let me do it. This is something that I want to do. The problem is that a lot of these guys think that they're the saviors of people. They think God has sent them to make the world a bit better, but it seems like they were sent straight from hell. So that's the reality. So I'm saying that competition, it's important, it's pivotal, and deregulation is the only way we can get there.
Absolutely. Sam, you're late, my brother. This is where we began the stream on. We're about to end the stream, and you can always definitely watch it. We began with this particular issue, and we've covered it quite righteously. Speaking about a righteous coverage, let me give each of you the righteous opportunity to get the last word in. Guys, what are you going to be looking at this week, and how do we reach you on your social media as we look to end the show? Nick?
So this week, the other thing I'm on, apart from Two Crickets and a Thorn Tree, is the Daily Friends Show, which you can find also on YouTube. We're just going to be going through everything that's happening this week, all the big stories, whatever comes up. And also check out my podcast with Gabriel Kwaza, Two Crickets and a Thorn Tree. To be honest, it's mostly Gabriel talking, but I do get to say things every now and again. And it's a good time. We always like to have fun on that podcast, and we cover a bunch of stuff from weird angles. So there'll be an episode of that coming out in the next few days.
Absolutely fantastico. Dumo, what can we expect from you this week? What is the Manpatria show going to be looking at?
All right, so the Manpatria podcast, I delayed the release till tomorrow, so it'll just go get on I Speaking. So catch it tomorrow at about 6 o'clock. It'll premiere at that time on YouTube, and you can watch it. And then also we had competitions, on social media, where people had to put some top comments and they got some prizes. So that show will air on Wednesday. So yeah, guys, that's what we're doing.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I just saw a very funny comment there. Obi-Wan Nobi, that's clever. That's clever. Shout out to you, Zero Knowledge Proof. Gideon, what can we expect from Paratus.info, the campaign in particular? How do people get involved?
Lots of things going on this week. Go to Dear SA, Dear South Africa. They're running the public participation campaign on there. That's where you lodge your comment. The cool thing about it is it's not a petition. It's a public participation. So every comment, every input, every contribution gets mailed to the originator, which is the Civilian Secretariat of Police, and it is tracked and counted and basically transparently and publicly kept note of. So nothing gets lost or missing. Get involved in that. Keep an eye on Paratus. We will be giving you info as to everything else going on, because there's a whole bunch of organizations coordinating together to take this thing on, some independently, but mostly in coordination. We are fighting this tooth and nail to the end, and we're going to win because, yeah, I nearly swore again, but I've hit my quota for tonight.
Absolutely. Guys, thank you so much for having joined us on this particular stream. And remember, you can also find Gideon's work at Paratus.info. Please check that out. And thank you, dear viewer, for watching. I see your comments. They've definitely come through. And a reminder, guys, that we're going to have the Big Daddy Liberty show this Wednesday at 7 p.m. It's going to be a cracker of an episode. Trust you me. We're filming it today, and all right. Anyway, so I'll see you on Wednesday for the BDL show. As I wanted to mention once again, the issue of the government coming after our gun rights and looking to remove self-defense as a reason for being able to apply for gun rights. This is something I will also fight tooth and nail, and more information will come out of that soon too. So that being said, thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you in the week for the BDL show. That's Wednesday at 7 p.m. Remember, before you leave, just hit that like button, please, and share the stream, or share the stream, please, just so that it gets out there and to the viewers. That being said, thanks for watching. I'll see you on Wednesday for the BDL show, and until then, never trust a commie